In other words, God, when God creates something, he creates it with the capacity to yield.
Yeah, that's right. Amen.
It's built in what God makes. Whether it's a grass or a tree or a person, he's made to yield. That is to produce some kind of fruit that goes back to God. Quite intriguing to consider it. And under the law, he talked about the land yielding. Now, see, in these, as you read this, you find that impersonal things yield. It's the personal things God has trouble with, so to speak. I speak as a man. The things that are impersonal, the brute creation, the inanimate creation, has no trouble yielding. It's the people made in the image of God who logically you would think would have the least trouble. Because they're made in the image of God, you'd think that they'd be more apt than even the brute creation. But lo and behold, they're least apt to yield. Notice what he said of the land in Leviticus 26:4. I'll give you rain. This is if they obeyed him and followed him. I'll give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. That's how things are going to work. It all hinges on your response to me, but there'll be a yield. That's the impersonal creation. Now there's a submitting to God, that yielding to God. If you endure chastening, for instance, you're yielding to God.
Amen.
That's what's happening. If you're obedient, you've yielded to God. You submitted yourself to him. You've come under his government willingly. Eventually, God's going to force everybody to do this. Eventually. See, every knee will bow. That's yielding. See? Every tongue will confess. That's yielding. Now, if you do it now, you get credit for it then. If you don't, it will count for nothing. It'll just be damnation then. Yielding. So this word is couched in 2 Chronicles 30, verse 8. Now be ye not stiff-necked, as your fathers were, but yield yourselves unto the Lord. What a word. That's the heart of God talking. That's not the lawyer side of God talking. That's the heart of God talking. So not yielding is stiff-necked. Won't turn your head. Here's God talking over here, and you won't turn. That's stiff-necked, see? Yielding is turning.
Yeah.
See, yielding first is I'll hear what he says, and then I'll do what he says. That's yielding. Don't be stiff-necked. Yield yourselves. You think God can't send someone to bludgeon you to do this? He can do this. Yeah. He could make you yield. See, he told Israel, he said, if you don't follow me, I'm going to spew you out of the land. Just like I did the Canaanites who were before you. Israel didn't believe him. So Nebuchadnezzar come in, he drove them out. He forced them out. See? So if you yield, you don't have this factor to deal with. But yielding also has to do with maturity, like a yield, like a tree yielding fruit or seed yielding fruit. Hosea 8:7, they have sown to the wind, threw away their resource, just threw it away. Had no idea where this would go. Listen, there's people you can give your resources to, you have no idea what they're going to do with it. No idea at all. Just like sowing to the wind, wherever it goes, it goes. And they shall reap the whirlwind. That is, you had a little gentle breeze there, but a tornado come back on your head. They'll reap the whirlwind. It hath no stalk. A seed that never had a stalk, I mean, what good is it? Stalk is what comes out of the ground, supports the fruit. The bud shall yield no meal. So a bud that never blossoms, what use is it? But see, it's called a yield. If so be it yield, the stranger shall swallow it up. So if it so be that the bud becomes fruit, and an actual wheat or an actual apple or actual grapes, then I'll have the enemy will come in, they'll eat it, you won't have a chance to do it. But see, the idea of yield there is that the fruit yields something. I know that there is a form of Christianity, that's kind of a clumsy way of saying it, a form of Christianity that's been adopted by our country where nothing really is expected from the Christian. It's just that they are a quote Christian or a member of the church or what. That is an end of itself. But see, with God, that's the seed. That's not an end of itself. Fruit is the whole point. The farmer knows this. He knows I could have the best seed in the world in my barn, but until it produces fruit, it doesn't mean anything. See? So a yield, God expects a yield. Even his son, you're part of the yield that's come from his son. Christ's own fruit, yield. So there it is used in that sense. That'd be of maturing to be the idea, a yield to be maturing. And then there's a submitting of the human will. There was one occasion when some Jews banded together, 40 of them, to kill Paul. They agreed to lay in wait for him and kill him. Paul found out about it, not by coincidence. God was in this matter. In Acts 23:21, there's an appeal made to a military man not to yield to these men who wanted to kill Paul. Here's what it says: "Do not thou yield unto them." Don't do it, for they lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath to kill Paul. Don't give in to them. So yielding has the idea of giving in, giving in to people. I will tell you that in all of these, yielding has to do with what's perceived as required or right. But you got to see it. But if you don't see it, you still got to do it. It's still got to be done anyway. Yield. Actually, it's to be understood that anyone who sins has yielded to sin. Nobody sins who doesn't want to sin. That's what temptation's all about, incidentally. From Satan's perspective, that's what temptation's all about, to make you want to yield to him. You're going to yield to somebody, but yielding, you can see the sense of it. Now let's look at and incidentally, it's God alone determines what men are to yield to or what they're not to yield to. God is the one who determines those things. The idea of yield contains that idea. It contains some kind of a predefined, something that your yield has been predefined somewhere. You don't just decide what you're going to yield to, although in a sense you do decide, but what you're to yield to has been defined by God. Otherwise, that destroys the concept of yield. Yield has the concept of this, some kind of standard, some kind of necessity that's been established that you're yielding to. You see it, so you devote yourself to it. Now let's look at the doctrine of yielding. As I say, this is a hard doctrine in our society, because we live in what's called a hedonistic society. That is a society that's a lover of pleasure. Yeah. So self-satisfaction is like the king of our environment. The pursuit of happiness and so forth. See, that's the American dream, and it's all about what you want. But yielding doesn't really have to do with what you want. It has to do with what you need or what is best. If you're in sync with that and that's how you see it, then that's good. So the very concept of yielding postulates or presumes or is on the foundation that someone has authority that you don't have. And you're submitting to it. So back behind yielding is this idea: the individual is not the principal person. Now the world's telling you you are. You first. You're the first consideration. What's best for you? What do you want? What is your dream? Whatever, see. But the principle of yielding is you're not the principal person at all. And eventually this will be very clear to everybody.
Yes, amen.
When the Lord returns again in all of his glory and all of the temporal, the heavens and the earth pass away with a great noise, the scripture says. The elements are built with fervent heat. No one's going to have any question at all about who the principal person is.